I've just finished The Mandalorian and Grogu in IMAX, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on the film overall. Full spoiler warning, by the way, because I'll be talking about things that happened in the film, so if you don't want to see that, just click off now. I also have a non-spoiler short up as well, so feel free to go watch that. I'll put that in the description. Overall, I think The Mandalorian and Grogu wasn't a bad film. As a Star Wars film, it was fun. It had the fights, it had the good visuals, especially in IMAX, the good battles, awesome planet design, and all these things you would want from a Star Wars film. I did also really enjoy the relationship between Mando and Grogu, but to be fair, that is exactly the same as how I really enjoyed them in the show. That then leads me on to one of my issues with The Mandalorian and Grogu, and that is that it is a little bit of a repeat, in my opinion, of what we've seen in the show. Like, not necessarily repeat, scene by scene, but it is a bit of a repeat when it comes to the similar plot. You get the bounty hunter bit, you get the thing that goes wrong, and then you go forward like that. It started off with a really cool action sequence, Mando chasing a bounty, very similar to the show, and due to the fact the film played it safe, there was not many stakes, so there wasn't much that could have gone wrong. So it really was a film that played it a little bit too close to the chest, a little bit too safe, and that is a disadvantage of the film. Getting back to the plot, unlike the show, this time he's working for the New Republic. He then gets hired by the Hutts, so that's quite an interesting plot point. I really did like to see the use of the Hutts as well, because that was quite cool, especially Rotter the Hutt. He was a very big part of this film that I enjoyed. Jeremy Allen White did a great job with Rotter, and the twins were also these, just, exactly what you expect of the Hutts, and then Rotter being the complete opposite of these twins as their nephew, and it was a very enjoyable process between those two. One thing about Rotter, though, that I did find a little bit jarring was some of his, lines that he had to say. I can't necessarily remember them specifically with what he definitely said, but he definitely had some more cringeworthy lines, I guess is the word for it. It's not necessarily, him needing to be this cinematic masterpiece of a character, because he is still a young child, a young Hutt, but there was definitely some lines that just did not land. But then it obviously turns out that Rotter the Hutt is being hired in this fighting arena, and, it kind of feels like when he catches the big bad he's looking for, the New Republic sends him via the Hutts to go and help Rotter. And I think the problem I have with this one is this whole part where he is going to try and save Rotter, and then he ends up eventually capturing with Rotter the Hutt and Zeb, which was really cool to see as well, because I love Rebels, going to capture the Imperial commander they were looking for. I feel like that could have been the end of the film. It felt like a film end when they captured him, and then we still had 45 minutes left of the film to go. And I think when it comes to the pacing, this film is where it just lacks completely. I think when you look at it as a whole, this 2-hour 10-minute film could have been split into 3 episodes of the show, and then it would have been more evenly spread. There was definitely moments during the film where you could have had that cutaway, that be an episode in itself, be an episode in itself, be an episode in itself, and that's what the film felt like. It felt disjointed. It didn't feel put together. That was a big issue with it. If this had come out as 3 episodes of Mandalorian season 4, it wouldn't be getting as much hate as I think it does as a film, because people wouldn't be getting whiplash with this film. They wouldn't be struggling with the pacing, because that is where it seriously lacks. It definitely feels like it could have been the show. It felt like a arc in the TV show. How each season will have multiple arcs throughout the 8 to 12 episodes, whatever it was. This felt like a 3-episode arc, and it could have done so much better as something like that rather than the film. Obviously, you can never please every fan, especially Star Wars fans, but I actually think that probably would have been a better layout for how they did this film in general. And yeah, anyway, with a lot of the film to go, where, shit goes wrong, Mando gets stuck on the planets with the Hutts, and then it does, decently ends and stuff like that, but it's a very played safe film. That is a criticism of this film you're going to hear me come back to multiple times in this review, because that is really where it falls short. I think the downside of it is, if you wanted a huge, big reinvention film of Star Wars, you're not going to get it. It's just a bit of a continuation, as I said previously, and for me as well, one of the things that are lacking is, I don't want to say the gore, because Star Wars isn't gory, but, it's definitely made for a younger audience, and it's definitely going to be extremely popular among a younger audience. I completely can see that. But for example, things like, yes, there being death, but I think there was only one scene where there was blood. You don't see the burn holes on the chest of the stormtroopers. You haven't been seeing any of those things. It definitely felt like it didn't even need to be a 12A rating. It could have been down to PG. Visually though, back to another positive, it was awesome. I think the action scenes felt bigger, faster and way more cinematic than the show. I think there's definitely some scenes in the show that I would have loved to have seen on the cinematic scale, 100%, and there is no way in my mind. I think when it comes to the rankings, I think I've got the Mandalorian season 1 and 2 sort of up in the top echelon, and then I think I've got season 3 very, you know, it can be above or below the film. I think they can rotate for me because the season 3 was the weaker part, and it kind of does very similar things that happen in Mandalorian season 3. Another positive that I do have with this film is the score. It was incredible. Genuinely, I might edge on giving this score like a 9 or a 10 out of 10, and for me, seeing that in IMAX, that really bumps up the overall rating of the film for me. I think the score can do so much for a film, and Ludwig Göransson was incredible, and like, he's already in for an amazing year this year. He's also composing for the Odyssey as well, which I think is going to be really cool, and he also has 3 Oscars to his name already. 2019 he won Best Original Score for Black Panther, 2024 he won Best Original Score for Oppenheimer, and in 2026 he won Best Original Score for Sinners, and that is a resume, guys. That is a resume, and genuinely, he is so good. Ignoring the fact that he's probably going to win Best Score in the Odyssey later this year, the score in this film should definitely be nominated in the category, because it's still incredible. Like, with many Star Wars films, the score is a really strong standpoint, even in bad Star Wars films, and this is, again, another one of those things. It's not a bad Star Wars film, but the score is certainly so much stronger than the narrative, 100%. Again, Ludwig Göransson is amazing. I think the relationship between Mando and Grogu is really cool. I loved the solo bit following the fact that Grogu had to look after Mando after he was poisoned, stuff like that. And as usual with Star Wars, all of the creatures looked awesome. That giant, like, white snake thing was so sick. And obviously seeing it in IMAX, you know, when he goes and snaps down and attacks Mando, that was so loud and so visceral. It was really awesome to see. Another inclusion I really loved was Embo and the Anzellans. That was awesome. Loved seeing that group in this as well. But Embo had so much aura. I really loved the scene where he was walking up to Mando's house with the lightning going off. That scene was so visceral and really perfect, actually, for me. I enjoyed that so much. I wish the fight between Embo and Mando was a little bit longer, but that was definitely a cool moment, and it led to a very key moment where Grogu had to save Mando for the first time, and that was really cool. Another negative of the film for me, actually, I think, is the convenience of it. The plot armor. I love the fact that Mando got himself a new Razor Crest, but I do slightly have an issue with films where they kind of just give them a ship to make the film more convenient, you know? Like, he had to earn the N1 Starfighter, you know? He didn't just get given that. You know, he literally just got given this brand new Razor Crest, you know, brand spanking new, shiny Razor Crest, which is meant to be a rare ship. And I know they tried to explain it off by saying they confiscated it from a guy that collects vintage ships. Like, yes, that could make sense, but giving it to him as payment for a small bounty that he did, you know, it was a little bit convenient. I'm not mad that he got it, but I was mad on how convenient it was. I think as well, stuff like when he lost his helmet and he fell into the pond with the dragon, the fact that he just all of a sudden ended up exactly where his helmet was to put that back on, I thought that was a little bit convenient as well. I thought he was a little bit convenient about how he got his helmet back, how he just got given a ship, and a couple of things like that. I also really enjoyed the practicality of the Grogu puppet. That was a really cool thing. I think the only like CGI they would have really used would have been on the little droid scene where he breaks it apart, but genuinely the Grogu puppet was a puppet for the majority of the film, and that was really cool to me. Even though he looked stocky, he's kind of meant to look stocky, if you know what I mean. Like, Grogu is a baby. Babies don't move around with perfect movement, and I really liked the fact that the Grogu in the majority of the film was a practical puppet. So overall, it was a really fun film, and I really enjoyed the Babu Freak inclusion. I really enjoyed the Grogu parts. He was hilarious, you know, just this child, and but then he also had his standalone moment where he had to look after Mando, and I really liked that part. But there is definitely some things where this film falls. It definitely plays it a bit safe, but that doesn't mean it's a bad Star Wars movie, because it is not. As a Star Wars film, it's very good. It's just a safely played Star Wars film. They didn't take a risk that could really have gone wrong, because it's a bit of a repeat of the show. Overall, though, where I'd place it in my rankings of the shows, it's certainly better than things like The Last Jedi, Rise of the Skywalker, Solo. In my opinion, it's 100% better than them, but obviously it's definitely a level down from the show itself and many of the other films, I think, bar maybe, I think I would put it on a very similar level, for me personally, to Attack of the Clones. I think it's not a awful Star Wars film. It's not a perfect Star Wars film, but it's still a lot of fun. And that's exactly what this Mandalorian and Grogu film is, and I really enjoyed it. I think The cast did a great job. It was lovely to see Zeb from Rebels. It was lovely to see Jeremy Allen White do a really good performance as Rotter. Pedro Pascal obviously doing a great job as Mando as usual. And then Grogu just steals these films and TV shows for me. I absolutely love him. So awesome to see. But I definitely recommend you go see it. If you can go see it in IMAX, then even better. I think it is a really fun film, and I definitely recommend you go see it. I think I'll give it a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. It's not perfect, and there's probably a little bit of Star Wars in cinema bias there for me. If I watch it again at home, maybe I won't enjoy it to the level that I did coming out of an IMAX theatre for it. But hey, still very fun, not an awful Star Wars film, definitely worth watching. And if you kind of go into it not necessarily expecting too much of a story, because that is where it lacks, you know, there's not necessarily a set start, a set end, a set goal that has too much impact on the universe. It doesn't necessarily have impact personally, but not the universe, then go into it, have fun for this Star Wars film that it is. Alright, tell me what you guys thought about it, and comment that down below, any thoughts, and I'll see you guys in the next one.